It was 9:12 on a rainy Thursday morning when my husband looked across the courtroom, smiled at me like I was nothing, and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "You'll leave here with nothing." Then he laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not an awkward one, the kind of laugh someone gives when they're absolutely convinced they've already won. I lowered my eyes to the folded envelope resting inside my purse. He had no idea what was inside it, neither did anyone else. At that moment, I thought humiliation couldn't get any worse. I was wrong. My name is Emily, and until that morning, I had spent 12 years believing love meant sacrifice. I met Daniel when I was 27. He was funny, confident, and the kind of man who made every room revolve around him. People admired him. My parents adored him. Even strangers trusted him after 5 minutes of conversation. I thought I had found my forever. Instead, I found the man who would slowly erase me. The first few years were wonderful. We rented a tiny apartment, worked long hours, and dreamed about buying a house someday. When Daniel wanted to launch his own financial consulting business, I believed in him more than he believed in himself. "I can't do this without you," he told me. So I worked overtime, I emptied my savings, I postponed graduate school. Every dollar I had went into helping him build his company. He promised me we'd build everything together. I believed every word. Looking back now, that was the moment everything started. 3 years later, his company exploded. Clients poured in, money followed. Suddenly, we moved into a beautiful home. Luxury vacations became normal. Expensive cars appeared in our driveway. Everyone congratulated Daniel for becoming self-made. No one knew who had paid the bills while he struggled. No one knew I had quietly signed personal guarantees for business loans. No one knew I'd worked 70-hour weeks while he attended networking dinners. I never cared about the recognition. I just wanted us, but success changed him. At first, it was little things. He stopped asking how my day went. He criticized my clothes. He rolled his eyes when I spoke during dinners with his clients. "You embarrass yourself," he'd say on the drive home. Eventually, he stopped pretending. "You'd never survive without me. You should be grateful. I built this life." Every sentence chipped away at my confidence. Then something happened that changed everything. One Friday evening, I came home early from work because I'd been feeling sick all day. Daniel wasn't expecting me. I heard voices upstairs, a woman's laugh. For one impossible second, I convinced myself it had to be a client. Until I opened our bedroom door, he wasn't even surprised. The woman grabbed her clothes and rushed past me. Daniel sighed like I was interrupting his schedule. "I guess now you know." I couldn't breathe. 12 years, I whispered. He shrugged. "It happens." That hurt more than catching him. No apology, no guilt. Nothing, just boredom. I packed a suitcase that night. He didn't stop me. As I reached the front door, he said something I'll never forget. "You'll come back." I looked at him. "No," he smiled. "You have nowhere else to go." I wish I had known what was coming next. The divorce papers arrived 2 weeks later. He filed first. His attorney was aggressive from the beginning. According to the paperwork, Daniel claimed our wealth existed because of his sole efforts. He described me as emotionally unstable, financially dependent, someone who contributed little to the marriage. Reading those pages felt like reading about a stranger. Every sacrifice I'd made had disappeared. Every late night, every paycheck, every promise, gone. My lawyer, Susan, looked exhausted after our first meeting. "He has excellent attorneys." "I know. They're trying to paint you as someone who simply lived off his success." I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. "I paid for his first office." She looked up. "Can you prove that?" I hesitated. I think so. Think isn't enough." That sentence haunted me for weeks. We searched through old records. Some documents had vanished. Bank accounts had been closed. Names were missing. Business files had somehow disappeared from the shared cloud account. Daniel had planned this. Every step, every detail. I thought that was the worst part. I was wrong. Friends began disappearing too. People I'd spent holidays with suddenly stopped answering calls. One woman finally admitted the truth. Daniel told everyone you're trying to destroy him. I sat there stunned. What? He said you're making false accusations because you want money. Money, the money I'd helped create. Within months, I lost more than a marriage. I lost friendships, my reputation, my confidence. Even my own parents struggled to understand. My father asked quietly one evening, maybe you should settle. Settle for what? Peace. I stared at him. Peace, funny how people always ask the wounded person to make peace, never the one holding the knife. A month before the hearing, Susan called me into her office. Her expression worried me. We've received Daniel's financial disclosure. She slid papers across the desk. It showed far less wealth than expected. Millions were missing. He transferred assets, she said. But where? We don't know. I felt sick. So he steals marital assets and gets rewarded? She didn't answer, because sometimes the truth sounds exactly like that. Then something happened I never expected. While cleaning old storage boxes in my parents' garage, I found a faded blue folder. Inside were documents from 12 years earlier, loan agreements to canceled checks, business registration forms, receipts, even handwritten notes, everything connected to Daniel's first business. My hands shook. One document stopped me cold. It was an unsigned draft partnership agreement, not legally binding. But attached to it was something much more important, a letter. My letter. I had completely forgotten writing it. It wasn't addressed to Daniel. It was addressed to myself. I had written it the night before investing my life savings into his dream. Inside, I'd listed every contribution I was making, every financial risk, every promise Daniel made, including one sentence in his own handwriting across the bottom. I'll never forget this. Everything I build belongs to us equally. Signed, dated, his signature. I stared at it for nearly an hour. Susan nearly dropped it when I brought it to her. Where did you find this? In a box. She carefully examined every page. This changes things. Really? It doesn't prove ownership by itself. My heart sank. But, she smiled, it destroys his credibility. I didn't fully understand until she explained. Daniel's entire legal strategy depended on convincing the judge that I'd contributed almost nothing. If the judge believed he'd lied about that, everything else could unravel. For the first time in months, I felt something unfamiliar, hope. Over the next few weeks, Susan built our case around facts instead of emotion. Bank records matched the checks. Employment records confirmed my overtime income. Mortgage applications listed my financial guarantees. Old emails resurfaced from archived servers. One by one, the truth returned, but Susan told me not to celebrate. Daniel doesn't know what we have. Shouldn't we disclose it? We will. When? She looked straight at me, at exactly the right moment. The morning of the hearing arrived faster than I expected. Daniel walked into the courtroom wearing an expensive navy suit and a smile that practically announced victory. His attorney greeted people by first name. Mine quietly organized files. Daniel glanced toward me. You still have time to accept the settlement? No. He leaned closer. You're making yourself look desperate. I didn't answer. He laughed. That same laugh. The one that echoed through my head long after our marriage ended. The hearing began. His attorney spoke first. She described Daniel as a hard-working entrepreneur who had carried an unmotivated spouse for years. She claimed I'd become bitter after the marriage failed. She questioned my honesty, my intentions, even my mental health. Listening to it felt surreal, like watching someone erase 12 years in real time. Then they called Daniel to testify. He was confident, smooth, charming. I built my company myself. Were there any significant financial contributions from your wife? No. Did she participate in the business? Very little. Were promises ever made regarding shared ownership? No. Every lie sounded effortless, every answer rehearsed. He even looked at me with pity, like I was the one lying. Then the judge turned towards Susan. Your witness. Susan stood slowly. She asked only a few simple questions. Then she opened a folder. Mr. Carter, do you recognize your signature? For the first time all morning, Daniel stopped smiling. Susan held up the document without any drama. Mr. Carter, she asked, is this your signature? Daniel looked at the page for only a second before answering. It looks similar. Similar? I sign hundreds of documents. Susan nodded. Of course, would you like a closer look? The bailiff handed him the original. For the first time that morning, Daniel's confidence slipped. He studied the page longer than he should have. I don't remember signing this. Susan smiled politely. I didn't ask whether you remembered. I asked whether that's your signature. He hesitated. It appears to be. The courtroom became noticeably quieter. Susan walked to the judge. Your Honor, we'd like to submit Exhibit 24 along with the supporting financial records already entered into evidence. The judge adjusted his glasses and began reading. The letter wasn't emotional. It wasn't written to gain sympathy. It was simply a record I had written to myself the night before I emptied my savings account to help Daniel start his business. It listed every bank withdrawal, every loan I agreed to guarantee, every sacrifice I was making. At the bottom was Daniel's handwritten promise. I'll never forget this. Everything I build belongs to us equally. His signature sat beneath those words. Daniel's attorney immediately stood. Objection. This is a personal letter, Susan calmly replied. The letter itself reflects contemporaneous evidence, but more importantly, it contains the respondent's own handwritten acknowledgement of the petitioner's financial contributions. It directly contradicts his testimony. The judge looked back toward Daniel. Mr. Carter, moments ago you testified that your wife made no significant financial contribution to your business and that no promises regarding shared ownership were ever made. Daniel shifted in his chair. I may have been referring to the legal ownership. That wasn't my question. Silence. I asked whether those statements were true. Daniel swallowed. They weren't entirely accurate. I felt my heartbeat pounding in my ears. For months, I had questioned my own memory. For months, he'd convinced everyone that I had imagined my role in building our life. Now, under oath, his own words were falling apart, but what happened next shocked even me. Susan requested permission to introduce another group of exhibits: bank statements, payroll records, wire transfers, copies of the personal loan I had guaranteed, DAMAB archives recovered from an old backup server. One by one, every document matched the timeline in my letter, every dollar I invested. Every payment I made while Daniel took the risk of building the company. Every mortgage payment during those early years. Every fact supported the next. The judge spent several minutes reviewing the evidence. Then he looked directly at Daniel. Your financial disclosure indicates several $1 million were transferred before these proceedings. Daniel's attorney answered before he could. They were legitimate business transactions. Susan slid another document forward. We subpoenaed those accounts. Daniel turned toward his attorney so quickly that she looked startled. You... what? She stared back at him. You told me those accounts had been closed. I thought they were. Susan didn't interrupt. She simply waited. The judge examined the statements. The funds were transferred into two holding companies created less than 4 months before the divorce petition. Daniel's face went pale. His attorney slowly lowered her pen. You failed to disclose these entities? Daniel didn't answer. She whispered sharply. Daniel, I was advised. No, she cut him off quietly. Don't say that. For the first time since I'd met him, Daniel looked completely alone. Looking back now, that was the moment everything truly changed. The judge called a short recess. I walked into the hallway, feeling like I could finally breathe. Susan joined me a few minutes later. You doing okay? I nodded, even though tears were already running down my face. I thought nobody would ever believe me. She smiled gently. Evidence doesn't always speak quickly. It speaks eventually. When court resumed, Daniel looked nothing like the man who had laughed at me that morning. His confidence had disappeared. His attorney requested a private conference with him. They spoke for nearly 20 minutes. When they returned, her tone had completely changed. Your Honor, we'd like to amend several previous representations made to the court. Susan glanced at me without saying a word. The judge wasn't impressed. Mr. Carter has already testified under oath. I understand. No, the judge replied firmly. I don't believe you do. Another uncomfortable silence filled the courtroom. The judge addressed Daniel directly. The integrity of these proceedings depends upon truthful financial disclosure. I understand. I don't believe you did until today. Daniel lowered his head. For years, he had spoken over me, interrupted me, dismissed me. Now he couldn't even meet my eyes. The remainder of the hearing focused almost entirely on the hidden assets. Financial experts explained how the transfers had occurred. The timeline showed they happened shortly before the divorce filing. Every explanation Daniel offered created another contradiction. The more he spoke, the weaker his position became. Finally, the judge leaned back in his chair. I have heard enough. The room became perfectly still. He began by addressing me. Mrs. Carter, this court recognizes your substantial financial and personal contributions during the formation and growth of the marital estate. My eyes filled again, not because of the money, because someone had finally acknowledged the truth, he continued. The respondent's testimony has been materially contradicted by documentary evidence, including documents bearing his own signature. Daniel closed his eyes. The court also finds the respondent failed to fully disclose significant marital assets. His attorney quietly placed a hand over her file. She already knew. The judge ordered a forensic accounting of every hidden account. The concealed assets would be included in the marital estate. Because of Daniel's lack of honesty during the proceedings, the court awarded me a substantially larger share than had originally been expected. He was also ordered to reimburse a significant portion of my legal fees. Daniel looked like he wanted to argue. His attorney gently touched his arm. He stayed silent. As everyone began packing their files, he finally walked toward me. I never thought you'd do this. I looked at him for a long moment. Do what? Destroy everything. I almost laughed. No, Daniel, you did that. He shook his head. It was just business. 12 years wasn't business. He had no answer. For the first time since I met him, there wasn't a speech. There wasn't an excuse. There wasn't another lie. He simply walked away. Several months later, the forensic investigation uncovered even more undisclosed assets than anyone expected. The court modified the final distribution accordingly, and Daniel faced additional legal consequences for his false disclosures. I never celebrated his downfall. That wasn't what I wanted. What I wanted was my name back, my dignity, the truth. I used my share of the settlement to pay off every debt that had followed me through the divorce. I finally enrolled in the graduate program I'd postponed more than a decade earlier. I bought a modest home that belonged to no one but me. For the first time in years, every decision I made was my own. Sometimes people ask whether I regret writing that letter all those years ago. I tell them no, I didn't write it to win a divorce. I wrote it because a small part of me wanted proof that my sacrifices had been real. I simply never imagined that one forgotten envelope would become the one thing my husband could never explain away. The morning began with him laughing at me in a courtroom, convinced I would leave with nothing. Instead, he walked out having lost the one thing he thought money could always buy, his credibility. And as I stepped outside into the sunlight, divorce papers in one hand and my future in the other, I realized something no court could ever award or take away. For the first time in years, I finally felt free.